Welcome to the HabitStack Podcast, where we talk to fellow founders who are in the thick of things as they execute their plans to grow their business. Because stories about past successes are interesting, but hearing from people who are in the middle of the battle right now, that's invaluable. I'm Scott Ward, founder of HabitStack. I'm here today with Chris Rodriguez, who is the CEO of iExcel. We're going to hear all about what he's up to and what he's learning. Chris, thanks for joining me on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Scott. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Tell us a little bit about what you're up to in this world, Chris. What is iExcel and who are you?
Sure. So iExcel is a digital marketing agency, technically based out of the greater DC, Virginia area. I am a transplant, so I'm native to the New York City area, but I've been in this market in DC tech for about 10 years. And so I feel like I've earned my stripes here while also having a good background of, New York City. So I'd like to consider not just me, but the business dual market. I cut my teeth initially in the music industry for 10 years, found a passion for digital marketing while in that space, to then realize I was suddenly more passionate about the digital marketing and the processes therein than the actual musicians, with the utmost of respect. So,
wait a second. Tell me. So what were you doing in the music industry?
sure. So I'm a music major from the University of Virginia. So I was the out-of-state New York City kid who tried to dabble in all things extracurricular. So I did music promotions. I was on the radio at some time. I managed talent, and then I came back home to the big city and essentially did a little bit of everything I've just described. Also, a little bit of what you might call street A&R, which is to say going to talent showcases, seeing up and coming talent, trying to connect the dots there. A lot of networking. And so meeting a lot of the right people on their paths upwards in their careers. And I've been in some cool rooms, had some cool conversations with some pretty relevant people. But I would say that I had an epiphany probably about 8 or 9 years in. I've got a top 25 university degree. I'm a pretty smart guy. I got a good education. I just found myself living a little too close to the starving artist lifestyle and mentality.
Yeah.
Found that my skills were transferable and suddenly stumbled upon this world called tech startups. And though I was a bit older than those that were just starting, I found it to be an advantage. So I had already built communities in MySpace. I had already built email newsletters of significant, followership. And so I became a 30-year-old rookie in tech. And the rest is history. A good chunk of years in New York, and as I've noted, more recently in DC.
What took you to DC, out of curiosity?
Well, first, the idea that I went to college in Virginia, the University of Virginia. I guess why would I have gone to college there? It was a good school, and I'm a big sports fan, and I was very drawn to the ACC, perks. Free football games, free basketball games, top education, can't go wrong there. I will say that during my time, we missed the national championships that UVA won, so that was unfortunate, but always stayed a fan of the sports and the sports teams. That was the real driver, to be honest. Others might have stories with more substance. That was my story. But I found my way to making the most of my time on a great campus with a great history and heritage.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so you were kind of in, I don't know if you're an agent or promotions, you were kind of in the sales and marketing adjacent area when you were in music. And then somehow you stumbled across not just digital marketing, but also kind of the subset of that, which is around startups. How did that happen? Like what, you rub shoulders with some musician startup people or something? Or how did you get into it?
No, so first I had to do a career transition, which is to say, technically, though I say that I have a good education, I didn't have a marketing specific education.
What did you get a degree in, by the way?
A music degree. So
right. Got it.
But I was essentially realizing I needed to take a small step back to take two forward. And so I got a digital marketing certificate. I didn't get an MBA, but I got a street smarts MBA, I suppose. And with that new certificate from NYU, I started to be intrigued about the job market in tech startups. To be very specific, I guess this is a cool part of the story. I was intrigued with the concept of an API. At the time, APIs were brand spanking new. And so I was researching APIs specifically. I was just smitten by the concept of systems speaking to each other.
Yeah.
It felt like a system building opportunity. And though I wasn't technical, I wanted to somehow get my feet into that space. And there was a company called Mashery. Mashery was a directory of APIs.
Right.
Just upon browsing and digging in there, I stumbled upon one particular company. That company, fast forward, was my first tech startup job. The company was called Speak.
Okay. Okay. So I know I'm kind of asking questions. I'm just kind of a curious guy. So, what was there you got a degree in music? Was it with a specific instrument?
So I played a good enough music in drums and piano, but if I
Okay.
were to be around real pianists or drummers, I'd be put to shame. I'd say I was probably like a 4 or 5 out of 10 on my best day. But really, I had a music major in terms of width rather than depth. And
Right.
so I studied the history of music, music production. I worked in the music library, and I just made sure that whatever the credits needed to be to, I guess, complete the task. Uh,
Right.
that was how I was thinking about it, as opposed to a mastery of a musical instrument.
Right.
And
Got it. Okay. So you didn't go kind of like, I'm going to take this and be in a band. You took it like, I want to be involved in music,
correct,
music, kind of the business of music, actually.
correct. So the book that meant the most to me was the I think it's like an 800-page book called The Business of Music. And honestly, I think I missed my time because a perfect school for me would have been a school like the Clive Davis School of Music in NYU, which is essentially like rooted around the music industry. That was really
Mm,
my calling. And
mm.
so I wanted to have a double major in music and economics. And I just couldn't really get the second major down. So I got the first one down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, that's all great context and a cool kind of trajectory. It is, um, it happens a lot, right? Where you don't end up. My degree's in philosophy, and so,
Okay.
and then I went into, uh, I was a software developer for a long time, and now I'm doing what I'm doing. So I think that those experiences, it's not a straight line. That's okay for most people. I see people, I see like going into university for the first time, just stressing so hard about what they're going to major in. I kind of get it. Maybe that's all right, but at the same time, it feels like that's probably going to change anyway. It's okay.
I mean, it's good to have a direction, of
Yeah.
course. You have a flag to aim for or a North Star, whatever the saying is. But, you have to also be willing to pivot, read the data, and all of that sounds very cliche, but it's true. It's the same way having a lean startup mentality is something that I found passion for during the beginnings of my tech startup career. And honestly, that concept holds beyond business. It's just, you know, be willing to aim in the right direction. But if you slightly pivot here and there due to life's course, that's actually okay rather than not.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay. So you're doing this startup related marketing, an agency for startups. Is that truly like all like 100% of what you're up to, or do you also do it for e-commerce and other brick and mortar and other types of businesses?
Well, I believe that the future of iExcel will be fully industry agnostic, vertical agnostic, B2B versus B2C agnostic. But the truth of the history is such where, because I have extensive experience and connections in tech startups, naturally, the people I know, the problems that I can solve, and by extension,
Yeah.
my happen to fit in mostly in that space. Now, that's not to say that we haven't had successful reps and efforts outside of tech, but often, even when that's the case, they're still tech oriented or tech adjacent.
Yeah.
So if you would have asked me that question 2 years ago, I would have said we're almost exclusively B2B SaaS, maybe 3 years. But things have evolved. Some of our best case studies are neither B2B nor SaaS. So at this point, it may sound a little cliche, but I tend to think of it as more of the academic nature of I enjoy the chase. I enjoy solving the puzzle that is the digital marketing funnel to fill. It differs per product, per company, sometimes per stakeholder. So
Right.
I just like to assess, determine the right solution, determine the tools, and fire away. And I've tried my best to hire a team of people that think that same way.
Christy, when somebody's thinking about working with an agency, I could imagine, right? If they're B2B SaaS and you say, well, focus on B2B SaaS, and like, oh, that's cool. That's probably better than a more general purpose. We do everything kind of agency. Do you think that's true? And if so, what are the things that are different about B2B SaaS marketing compared to other businesses?
Well, to answer the first question, I would say I have heard countless times the riches are in the niches. So therefore, advisory is always to niche down, to specialize.
Yeah, man, and you're kind of doing the opposite. You're kind of describing the opposite trajectory. So tell me about that.
Yes. So it's a little bit intentional. And part of it is because of what I just described, which is the passion to solve the puzzle. I often say, maybe a little tongue in cheek, but reading the room around me, right? So there's a cup in front of me, there's a speaker, there's a screen, there's a microphone, there's a keyboard. And I
Yeah.
take pride in knowing that I can sell or market each and every one of these things. There's a right target market. There's someone who cares about this product. There are words that they use. There are message boards they frequent, online groups. And the fun is in discovering all of that and then understanding the messaging that matters, the mediums that matter, and seeing what happens and having a data-driven, sort of emotionless approach. You can be informed, but if you were to niche down, the pros certainly are the specialization, but the cons are you don't get to have that fun that I just described.
Yeah. Yeah. The
Uh, you know,
variety.
some people like the context switching. The challenge is that change over time. Some people like simplicity, and I'm not that guy. And those that perhaps have collaborated with iExcel or worked with us in the past, that maybe that's not their bag. Totally understood, but that's probably not going to be a successful connection there versus someone who literally, again, enjoys the chase, almost lives the lifestyle. That's what it means to be part of iExcel and sort of adjacent to me, Chris. And your second question was to explain a little bit more of the predictability of the B2B SaaS funnel. So, part of it is there are traditional SaaS metrics, right? There's CAC, there's LTV, there are ratios, there's certain predictability of metrics that companies that are trying to raise VC funding care about, probably more in an earlier stage than they might later, versus other types of companies, they just want revenue and customers now. And that feels very normal when I say it, but that's actually not as normal in B2B SaaS. There's almost like a very longer process, and I don't mean longer in terms of the funnel as much as I mean longer in terms of if you're really trying to represent this company, there are phases, there are series, there are stages. It almost behooves you to think that way and understand the mentality of the owner, the decision maker in that space. So it's a little bit of tech psychology that maybe my first B2B SaaS company, I wouldn't have known that or appreciated that. But now, having been in so many and worked with so many, it is true that there is an expertise there, and we can, I can just hear a quick story and a brief 30-minute chat with a B2B SaaS founder and know exactly what they need and where they are in that space. So there is a bit of a niche specialization
Right.
there. I mean, you could argue like what vertical wouldn't have a B2B, a niche specialization, I should say. But that happens to be the one that we started
Yeah.
on it.
Are you talking about like basically if you have a VC backed startup that's chasing growth more than revenue essentially, and that is a somewhat peculiar or unique aspect of it's not
Sometimes to
completely
start,
unique.
that is the case.
Yeah.
Sometimes success is actually not generating revenue. It's actually generating a large user base.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Another thing is, not to say that lifetime value is some B2B SaaS unique metric, but the idea that it is almost exclusively digital in nature. And so, having segments of your user base in a database, understanding the upsell opportunities, the rehash opportunities, um, the continued communication with logical segmentation. And again, as I say that, you could say, yeah, that could apply to most other verticals, but there's a simplicity to the digital nature of it where you just create your groups, you create your tests, rinse and repeat, and you have a sort of experimental budget that is rooted into the concept of we've raised money and therefore there is a carved out budget for loss of money to learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not something that is as traditional in other markets.
Do you see a shift there these days away from burning cash to grow and more towards, yeah, no kidding, we got to make money?
I mean, not as much as you might think. I think perhaps where you're going with that is the idea that the market is shifting not to, not as free spending as maybe it used to be back in the but that said, there are people with budget and people without budget, period. And those that have budget mean in that space, in the B2B SaaS space, means that they've raised funding. And the nature of raising funding inherently says, I need
Yeah.
you to tell me lessons. I need to actually learn the lessons, meaning from a VC's perspective. And I want you to burn this cash, at least a chunk of it, in order to learn these lessons. And I want you to actually hire relatively expensive people quickly to get these lessons learned quickly. That it's a little bit of a mentality, I would say.
Yeah, I think that what you're saying there with the learning lessons, spending money to learn lessons quickly, to me that really captures a difference, a different mode that a company can be in versus like, yeah, I mean, it's all about revenue. We want revenue to go the right direction, and so and if you've raised money, you're in the lesson learning business, essentially.
Inherently, right?
Yeah.
Because how are you going to get that next round unless you just have to reverse engineer success. So what is success to raise that next round? It's a deck that explains the things that you've learned and the users that you have. So now give me more money so that I can further enhance the user base, squeeze more money out of them and the lessons that I've learned so I can focus. And you have to have tried 10 things to have learned eight will fail and two will succeed to then ask for more money to put the gas on the two that will succeed.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's essentially what you help companies do, like go through those 10 channels, figure out which one they should use, double down on the ones that worked.
To some extent, yes. The truth is, it depends on the need, really. If we go to a later stage company, then we're on the other side of that
Yeah.
story, right? If we are going to an earlier stage, then it's the learning part. Often we have one of a handful of personas or situations that fit quite well. One of them is what I described, which is the learning aspect, and sort of the folks that might hire us, they know that they don't know, and so it's like, just tell me what works, tell me what doesn't. Here's money, go. Another one would be, I guess, akin to that is we're so early we don't even have infrastructure.
Right.
Build the infrastructure.
We've never done marketing before.
Never done marketing. We are early. We are nascent. Teach us, good sir. Right, like
Yeah.
that is a winning persona for us. Another is inheriting a mess. We've already had agency one, perhaps agency one and two, and they've tried this thing, but neither of them have worked. They've overpromised, they've underdelivered, or this infrastructure is messy. I don't even know where to start. I've heard that you fix messes. Can you take a look at this, audit it, and tell us what's wrong? And assuming we give you our blessing, fix the things that you've said are wrong. That's an arena that we play in quite nicely.
Why do you think that happens, Chris? Out of curiosity, that's an interesting one. Like what? Because this is I think a difficult thing for when you're hiring, when you work trying to find a vendor for anything. Actually, it is incredibly time consuming and error prone to find a vendor that actually can deliver, whether it's marketing or something else, right? It's just well, it's like hiring general. Actually, it's a little better than hiring. Probably, it's at least you can part ways more easily. But what do you think goes wrong that doesn't go wrong with iExcel?
Well, I'll say that for better or worse, as it relates to the growth of iExcel in my company, everything that has happened so far has been through the traditional founder-led sales story. So referrals, it's not thus far that the iExcel machine has been fully matured and built with a bunch of thought leadership out in the wild. And in other words, we can build it for others, but we haven't necessarily followed our own best practices for our own brand. And that's something that I hope will change in 2026 and beyond. But to answer your question, everything has been off personal relationships in my own personal network. So I have about 30,000 LinkedIn connections. I've got about 75 LinkedIn reviews that are all saying, hey, this guy is the best thing since sliced bread. I stand by
Right.
that. I've gotten a bunch of what we talk about is word of mouth. And like, what does word of mouth actually mean? What word of mouth means is to be top of mind when person, whoever he or she may be, is posed with a problem or a conversation. So John and Jim are at the bar, and they're both C-suites. And John has worked with Chris Rodriguez or iExcel before, and Jim says, "Hey man, I need a marketing guy."
Yeah.
Right? So, "Hey, I know a guy," and then I'll get a hot email.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so, I don't take that lightly. People are putting their name, their reputations out there for Chris Rodriguez for iExcel, and so I personally take pride in honoring that. When someone needs to go above and beyond, say you've worked with an agency that maybe has hundreds of reviews, but really you're a cog in a machine. They might not go above and beyond. Whereas
Right.
I will take pride in going above and beyond and making sure that my team understands that that's what it means to work with Chris and iExcel. Now, in several years from now, when scale is a beautiful problem to have, I only hope to be able to maintain that same mantra that I've just shared, but inherently scale can clash with intimacy. So, the challenge that I seek is to keep that DNA while doubling, tripling, quadrupling the company.
Yeah.
But
But
your first problems for a year or two ahead.
even so, it's an interesting dilemma and question. Do you have some thoughts on how to do that well? Have you had some experiences from companies that do that well, even as somebody who's been a vendor to you? Or I guess I'm curious. You said something very, very poignant. Scale is at odds with intimacy. That's not quite what you said. Something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you know, how do you solve that? How do you break that mutual exclusivity?
Well, in fact, I'll throw it back to you, Scott, because you had mentioned a little bit, maybe tongue in cheek earlier, which is about the hiring.
Yeah.
So, the answer is it has everything to do with the hiring, in my opinion. And
Mm,
so, if I want to quote unquote clone myself, what does that actually mean? Um, certain of my qualities are unique to me, and certain of my qualities may not be necessary in terms of the business repeatability process. But what is required if you really want to keep that DNA? And so you have to have an intrinsic passion for the funnel. Someone like, in other words, in the irony, because I realize the company has the word Excel in it. You might one could easily associate, whether tongue in cheek or not, spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with spreadsheets. And yet I personally love spreadsheets. So in other words, imagine someone who is passionate about um, data integrity such that you can fully empower a pivot table in a spreadsheet. Like, I care about that.
Yeah.
So I'll spend the time to clean data so that I can have a final pivot table that works quite smoothly. I need people who give a you know what about it.
Mm.
And that's hard to determine unless you interview well, unless you present puzzles to solve and understand someone's critical thinking, right? You know, I want to think about hypersegmentation. I want to know that a database isn't just a group of 1,000 people. It's actually 10 slices of 100 or 100 slices of 10. And that comes so naturally to me that I want to know that the person who is representing me and my company at least is capable of thinking those thoughts.
Yeah.
At the very least, with a little bit of coaching, can replicate exactly that. I'll also say, and this part is the biggest challenge, the less academic, the more lifestyle. It's hard to tell somebody in 2025 about hustle culture. Gary Vee has the exact DNA that a guy like me thinks about. At least I believe so based on the videos. And yet, there's been a sort of desensitizing of hustle culture. Some people are like, hustle culture, and throw it away, throw it off.
Right.
And being a hustle culture guy trying to hire into that, right? So it's almost like taboo to say, hey, if the client slacks you at 5:30 p.m. on a Thursday, I'm not necessarily asking you to work all night, but I expect that it would be natural for you to, like, at least slack him back or her back.
Come back. Yeah, exactly.
He heard you. And think about how obvious that is to certain people and how almost principally against that some people would be, especially in 2025. I've had a challenge of that type.
Right.
Smart as you want to be, I could be paying you top dollar. But if you don't feel it's appropriate to care about customer success at that level, then are you really reflecting the iExcel experience? Because I would do it, and I have 3 kids and a mortgage. So it's natural to me, right? It's not even a big deal. It's like, of course, why wouldn't I?
Right.
That's the challenge right there.
Yeah. So I think you're right. There's one of the approaches is around hiring. I think there's also something around going back to the niche, the niching down, right? Like having a narrower scope. I know this is kind of at odds with your personality, which I'm just brainstorming about the ways that people scale and maintain quality. And part of it is that you have less complicated, like you have a repeatable kind of set of problems that you're really good at. You're not
Sure.
reinventing the wheel. But I guess the other option with you is just to go like way up market. Basically, you're go guru, essentially. 10x your rates, and you keep doing the kind of thought leader, guru, small kind of, you scale that way, basically. Scale pricing, don't scale.
Now, what I would say is there's a right answer somewhere in the middle. And I don't say this with such authority as if I figured this out, but I know that this is the vision, and I have prioritized this with my company, which is the concept of detailed SOPs and the ability to simply put the solution of the puzzle, as I've said before, in the form of stackable service offerings
Right.
that are hyper detailed in terms of their standard operating procedures.
Yep.
If I hear that someone simply needs to build infrastructure from scratch, so there's a service called marketing automation build out, there's a service called paid social build out, there's a service called X, there's a service called Y, and then
Right.
the solution is the stack of those services. And if I can deploy those to my team, even future team members, there are 15 linear bullet points in that SOP. Log into this URL, do this action, then look at this screen and do it that action. then I can hire experts who will look at that and say, I don't need that nonsense. I got this. Versus juniors who can say, oh, thank you for that hyper detail. And therein lies the repeatability. So I predict that certainly for next year, iExcel is focusing on that level of scalability. To that, sure, you could argue certain verticals have maybe certain repeatable playbooks, but at the end of the day, it's still, in terms of the operation that I'm trying to build, a stacking of X number of services. And again, if well detailed out, then really it's just a fulfillment challenge.
Right. Right. Yeah. This makes me think of another question, but I'm curious to get your input on. I was recently talking to a leader who, the thing that made me think about it was the SOPs and whatnot. So this leader was being accused of micromanagement, the M word. And I'm just curious, like in your mind, what's the line between micromanagement and paying attention? As a founder, how do you kind of like navigate that line?
So that's a great question. And I have certainly had my challenges. But I think you have to intrinsically, in your head and your heart as a leader, accept that perfection is the enemy of good enough.
Mm.
And if you really want to move fast and scale, you have to hire people that are trustworthy, that are smart, and expect that not everything is going to go perfect, and that is okay. Even if, for example, it gets to the existential level of someone messed up and I just lost a client, you can't take it personally. You just have to understand that you believe in the law of averages. Every time there's a downtick, I suddenly get surprised, and it's almost a reminder with like a new lead, a new opportunity, a better opportunity, a less difficult client. And if you just believe in that cycle, a long time ago, I made a decision to focus on demand generation because I realized there's no debate. Everyone always needs customers.
Yeah.
If you're at the precipice of that, you'll be fine. There will always be the next company or need. Given my history and my expertise, there will always be a lucrative opportunity. And so you just got to believe that there will be more pros than cons, and just let it go. I'm sure there are exceptions, but I have tried to root myself there. When you need to put the hammer down, you got to put the hammer down. But when you do that judiciously, you're not losing your team's trust. You're not cannibalizing the reps when you're being vocal about it.
Cool. So what you're saying is basically err on the side of giving autonomy, freedom, and trust, and not because everything's going to be perfect, but because it's going to be good enough in the long, medium term, even if there's a bad day here or there.
You have to really believe that, yes.
Right.
And that's not easy to get to. And I'll say, as someone who, let me just say what it is. This is my baby, right?
Yeah.
This is my individual consultancy. It was the royal we for a long time.
Right.
I still remember like yesterday, the very first time that I hired someone with a real salary and a real health insurance. I was almost, feeling like imposter syndrome, like little old me is responsible for someone's paycheck and life and, health insurance. I don't take that lightly, but at some point you can overthink it, right? And so you have to go through the reps. At this point, I'm ready to hire smart people at market relevant salaries. If it doesn't work out, God forbid, I've had enough reps where like, hey, as long as I can address that ethically and logically and with reason, like it is what it is. And I just hope that I can, to my earlier point, hire well on the front end so that I don't have many of those experiences.
Yeah.
and that allows for the speed and the scale. Now, I will also say, and this is probably the same for most founders or CEOs, like we have quirks. I'm an acquired taste, right? When I talk loud and with passion to the right person, I'm a passionate, loud New Yorker, no big deal. To the wrong person, whoa, what's this guy doing here, right? Like, this is a little much. I like a more polished approach. I like a calmer approach. Well, then this isn't your bag, what is it? Your bag of tea or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
For you then, and that's okay. And so this is an island that you've landed on, and when you first land on this island, it is a mutual courtship. I'm vetting you and you're vetting me too, and I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
So, we gotta figure this out. And I'll end this point with the baseball batting average analogy. I don't know if you're a baseball guy, Scott, but
Well, I'm in Canada, so it's not a good time for baseball for me.
well, I'm a Yankees fan, so I would argue that it is a good time for you because you guys beat us, and I was there for that. Mm,
For
now-
context, if you listen to this, the Blue Jays just very recently lost in the World Series in Game 7.
right, but glass half full. You got to Game 7 of the World Series, so
It's true. It's true.
there's perspective there. Now, I guess my point there for those of you that are not baseball fans is if you bat 1 out of 5, meaning you have failed 4 times, that's not so great. It's batting 200. If you bat 300, which is, I guess, 1.5 out of 5 times, so let's just say 3 out of 10 times, you're considered a really good batter. And if you bat 2 out of 5, which is to say 400, you're actually in the Hall of Fame. So what that means is you can actually miss 3 times and succeed twice and be considered a Hall of Famer. You're
Right.
not just good, you're great, you're incredible. Now, I wish my batting average were better than that, but the truth is I try to keep that mentality as I'm bringing talent into the building, which is to say I'm almost expecting more failure than success, with the utmost of respect to anyone who's come through the iExcel doors. And you have to be ready for that. Expect that I'm going to train this person up. I'm going to spend time, money, energy on this person. And I'm actually modeling, God forbid, but it might fail. And I have to just be okay with that. You're just trying to get as many successes as possible while accepting that most of this will fail.
I think it's a good perspective because, if the expectation is to bat 4.5 out of 5, you're not going to do anything,
Right.
right? You're not going to do anything. It's just, it's too high. It's too high. And if life is just probabilities.
Sure.
And you got to be okay with that. Got to make a judgment. If the probability is that you will be successful, then you got to move forward on it. But what probabilities mean is that they're gonna either gonna fail. They're gonna fail periodically. It's
either fail it. It's a ratio. Exactly that.
yeah.
I should also qualify before we move on from this point. We were talking about the Toronto Blue Jays and the New York Yankees. I'm a diehard Yankee fan, but for those of you that are watching the video, that might be confusing because I'm literally wearing a Washington Nationals hat, and so I just wanted to represent both my physical location as well as where my heart lies. I'm a diehard Yankee fan, but I certainly, at this point, being a 10-year transplant, I do represent the market as much as I can as well.
That's good. Yeah. So one last question before I let you go is, I'm curious as you see, my area of interest is in strategy execution and how to do that in the context of a busy operational running the business.
Sure.
And so before you have this interesting challenge of scaling and operating, hiring SOPs, doing these service stacks that you're talking about. There's a bunch of work over and above the normal work. And so I'm curious how you organize and align everybody at iExcel against those kind of important but not urgent things? How do you move those ahead?
Well, I'd like to say, almost case study worthy as it relates to our task management tool usage.
Hmm.
So, I spend $400 to $500 a month on our Asana instance, and our Asana instance has existed since 2015. For those of you, just for a time, it's November 2025 as we're having this chat. So, in another life, I was admin. I like to joke. I've been when this was the royal we, when it was just me, I was almost psychotic with my treating myself as if I were bigger than me. And so I
Right.
had to create detailed tickets for myself with robust due dates,
Right.
even though I could easily just not have done it and just say, yep, got to do that task. I have it all in my head. And I believe in paper trails. So therefore, all of that history exists in this portal. Therefore you can search all kinds of SOPs, history of clients. And so to answer your question, we have Scrum, we have biweekly sprints, even though we're a small, intimate team of 5. We have robust projects and folders as it relates to different clients, meaning the moment they have a new ask, we actually have a good habit of creating a separate project folder as opposed to just a task under the same ecosystem for that client.
Right.
And I would think, even though for those that come into our world and are new, it can feel overwhelming. I have also received feedback like, wow, there's a lot of organization. This is quite impressive. Um, again, for the right person,
Right.
right? Where the right person finds joy in the hyper organization and hyper
Yeah.
detail.
Yeah, cool. So for the strategy execution stuff, it sounds like that's your cadence. You have 2 week sprints, and I'm sure it's all loaded up into Asana, and you have these Scrum meetings where you kind of go over where things are at, and kind of that's the cadence you run.
I should also give a lot of props and value to the concept of recording meetings. And so every meeting we have a meeting recorder. I am not paid to say this, but we use the tool called Grain. Grain is probably one of the most efficient line items on my P&L. It's less than $100 a month for our instance, and especially given the AI summary improvements. But the truth is, sometimes I just take the transcript and pop it into ChatGPT. I can understand both the micro, this specific call, what are the takeaways, what are the things that the clients, what are the expectations of iExcel, what are the expectations of the client, what is the sentiment of the client.
Yep. Yeah.
And I can do that consecutively as well. So in one session or in a GPT built, the second call, the third call, the fourth call, and to come back and say, hey, what did we miss? What did we promise that we didn't actually create into a ticket?
Yeah.
Kind of robust infrastructure really just solves the ticket creation problem for us, the gaps problem, the retroactive, like, where are we at with this client? 6 meetings.
Right.
What's the means on our scope? And so that call recording culture, I mean, it wasn't that long ago where people were like, why do you have a recorder on the call?
Mhm.
I've had a few people that I've had to learn the hard way that were offended that I just presumed that I should be allowed to bring this recorder in. I spoke to a guy who was responsible for security at Google. It was just an auto ad, and he got really ticked off because I didn't ask him.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Although I think it's getting normalized now. I think it's
Certainly
it's going away now.
to ask. I learned to ask,
Right.
hey, is it if I bring this recorder in? And they often say yes. And literally, it's changed the face of this company, call recording.
Cool. Well, there's a lot of good information there for people to chew on. I like what you're up to, Chris. I mean, I think your B2B SaaS is actually close to my heart, as you can imagine, and so and also I find that for myself and for many people, marketing is really hard. Marketing is really hard, and so I'm glad that people are like you are available to share your expertise. So thanks for coming on the show today. I appreciate it. It was a pleasure to get to know you.
Thanks for having me, Scott. I really appreciate the time.
Have a good one. Founders, if you're struggling to manage goals and execution with your team, HabitStack can help with that. I'm Scott Ward. Thank you for joining me on the HabitStack Podcast.